This is The Metro on 1019 WDET. I'm Tia Graham. Back in April, the Michelin Guide announced that it will be releasing an American Great Lakes Guide in 2027. The book will offer restaurants in Detroit and 5 other cities that live along the lakes a shot at earning their coveted Michelin star ranking. This year marks the 100th year of the Michelin star, and yet no Michigan restaurant has received one. Why is that? And how did a company known for its tires become a premier voice in the food and dining space? Lindsay Green is restaurant and dining critic for the Free Press. Shortly after the Great Lakes Guide was announced, she wrote an article to help explain the Michelin star process. She joins us now to discuss it. Lindsay, welcome back to the Metro.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, of course. So, most of us know Michelin for their tires. How did they become a significant voice in the dining world?
So it's actually kind of an interesting history. So it's a great kind of marketing tactic, really. So back in the 1800s is when Michelin was founded, and there weren't that many cars that were on the road in France. And so the brothers who were behind the company, they said, hey, to get more people driving, why don't we create this guide that encourages them to drive some more? That's really where it started. And so they had a guidebook that was printed that they would just publish for free. And it had things like, pit stops for gas, or how to change a tire, or kind of, things that just had to do with your vehicle. And included in that were restaurants that you could sort of visit on, while you're out and about. And then it just grew from there. Eventually they said, okay, we shouldn't, do this guidebook for free. Let's actually charge people and make it meaningful. And then they started their star system. And that's really where things sort of took off, where now it's like we're rating restaurants from 1 star to 3 stars. It's interesting.
It's beyond interesting. Oh my gosh.
Genius, really.
My goodness. And of course they didn't think it would take off the way it has, but for a simple travel guide to turn into something that people use as a barometer for restaurants is absolutely astonishing.
It is.
Now, the guide started giving out its stars in 1926. Detroit was growing toward becoming a world-class city at that time. Why did it take 100 years for the stars to finally make it to Detroit?
Well, so you have to think, so that year, 1926, is when they started, but the Michelin Guide has actually only been in the U.S. since 2006. Oh. Yeah, so it's been, exactly 20 years since it's been in the States. And then when you think about that, right, we look at 2006, and what did Detroit look like then? What did Detroit's food scene look like then? I've been here now for 9 years, and I've seen how much it's grown, and we really have a beautiful, beautiful dining scene. But I wouldn't say that that's what existed in 2006. No. And so it's taken time, I think, and what you have to think about with this guide, which is the Great Lakes Guide, it's not just Detroit, right? So there are 6 cities that are a part of this guide. And so we're looking at the entire Midwest in a way, right? Not the entire Midwest, but a big chunk of the Midwest. And so when you, again, think about where the Midwest has been in terms of their dining scene in the past 20 years, I think it's taken some time for it to grow and for Michelin to get on its feet in the U.S. too.
Yeah. It's just striking because, like you said, you've been here for 9 years, and in that time, you've watched the culinary scene, dining scene, restaurant scene in Detroit completely just boom. It's grown so much.
Yeah.
Even in this 9-year span you've been here, don't you think that we've been good enough to have a Michelin star in that time?
I think that there are a lot of cities that are deserving of this attention, this recognition. And so, maybe a couple years ago, sure, maybe had they thought to come to Detroit, it might have made sense. But, I do think that we're still growing. And I think we'll even see when the guide releases next year. I don't know how many stars we'll have. I don't know how many restaurants we'll have in the guide. And I do think that we should manage our expectations there. I love this dining scene. I love restaurants here. I love the people behind the restaurants here. Do I think that there's still work that needs to be done? I do.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's break down the process for folks. So over the next year, anonymous reviewers are going to dine at Detroit spots across the city. Do we have any clue when that process will start?
So it's already started.
Oh.
Yeah, the inspectors have already been here. When they made the announcement, what was that, back in April, they shared that inspectors have been in the region for, I can't remember how long they said they'd been here, but they're already here.
Yeah, and how long are they going to stay till the end of the year or just a few months?
I don't know what their timeline is, so I'm not sure exactly when they'll, stop and just start sort of putting together the list, but they're here.
Mm-hmm. And when the reviewers do come to Detroit, they are here, so now that they're here, I can't imagine they will go to every single restaurant. Do you know what kind of restaurant qualifies for a visit?
So really it's from my understanding, and I should just clarify that, it's such a secretive process, and that's intentional. Their inspectors are all anonymous. And so a lot of this is really just what we're finding on their website and conversations with folks. But so I don't know how many restaurants they'll visit. I imagine they'll try to get to as many as they can. I imagine they may consult my reporting or reporting of, food writers who are in the Detroit area to kind of figure out where they should go. Yeah. But it's, from what they're saying, they are open to any type of restaurant. What's interesting, and this can be argued, but what they say is that they only focus on what's on the plate. They're not evaluating ambiance, service. Entirely, the focus is just the food. I would say I don't know how much I believe that, because I think as human beings, can you imagine, I'll ask you, right? Exactly. Can you imagine going to a restaurant, sitting there and having a delicious meal, but I don't know, the server was nasty to you, or they just plop your food on the table? It's gonna color your experience. I just can't believe that as a human being you can really separate yourself that much. But from what they say, it's just the food on the plate, which means they could end up anywhere. It can be casual, it can be fine dining, it can be somewhere in the middle. Really, they can land anywhere.
Wow. You're listening to The Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham. My guest is Detroit Free Press dining reporter and critic Lindsay Green. And we are breaking down how the Michelin star came to Detroit, and if a restaurant is awarded a star rating, what it could change. Now, how important is this rating, especially today? What does it actually look like for a restaurant to get a star?
Well, I think we'll have to see exactly what it means here in Detroit. But when you look at other cities internationally or here in the U.S., it matters tremendously. Mm-hmm. A Michelin star can make or break a restaurant. I've heard, back, we mentioned that they started here in the U.S. in 2006. And I had heard that back then, for a restaurant that earned a Michelin star, it meant that they were booked for, the rest of the year. And for a restaurant that did not, it could mean that they closed, So these sorts of award systems really do impact a restaurant tremendously. And I would say that remains to be the case. I think there are people who travel just to try Michelin star restaurants. Yeah. They'll go to a city just to try that 3-star restaurant, which would be the highest honor. And so it means a lot. And I believe that it could mean a lot for our dining scene, which is still growing for a lot of reasons. And maybe we'll talk about that later. But I think that it is something that you can argue, whether you roll your eyes at these sorts of award systems. The Michelin is not the only barometer. There are others out there. I'm an Academy chair of North America's 50 Best Restaurants. Yeah. And so, and we've heard of James Beard and all of these things. And so people have a little bit of this award fatigue and this sort of star system fatigue, and they kind of are maybe side-eyeing these organizations, but I do think that they still do hold weight. And so whether you agree with them or disagree with their choices, there is a segment of the population that really values Michelin and a star, and will see that red plaque, in your restaurant, in front of your restaurant, and they will walk inside. And you really can't deny that.
It's the truth.
It's the truth.
And it's so interesting because I once again, when I'm speaking with creatives in general, whether they're chefs or artists or whatnot, whatever it may be, we often hear like, Detroit tends to not really care about the extra special accolades. We're going to do our thing regardless of what anyone says. Yet there is power in having that validation.
Absolutely.
From those organizations. We can acknowledge the elephant that's sitting on the table right now, that this is a French company coming to Detroit, which has a variety of cuisines. Detroit does. How confident are you that the city and the non-white or European chef will get an actual shot?
That is a hard question. So I do think that what is in our favor, is that there are more designations within the Michelin Guide beyond just stars. And so there's the Bib Gourmand, which is an option, and that sort of tends to recognize restaurants that are more affordable, that are maybe more casual. And I do think that there are opportunities for some restaurants that are owned by people of color and that represent different sort of cuisines and kind of ethnic backgrounds. I think that there are opportunities there. Do I believe that, let's say, a Black-owned restaurant will earn a star? I cannot confidently say yes. And that makes me sad. I genuinely say that with pain, because I've traveled to many other cities in this country. I think about Chicago, I think about Philadelphia, and it's an interesting emotional roller coaster for me because I feel so happy. There are great restaurants and I'm excited to be there, and I'm happy to see these Black-owned restaurants doing so well. And then I feel this sadness in the pit of my stomach because a city like Detroit should have that. And I can't quite say that we're there yet. And I do think that there are opportunities to get there. And I do see that there are some people who are working toward it. I don't know if Michelin will see that. I do think that's also something that someone like me, who is based here and sees these people and how hard they're working and what they're trying to do day in and day out, that a Michelin inspector, if they are not from here and not based here and they are just maybe flying into this region, they might not see that.
Well, I guess we'll find out more next year, who gets those stars and will there go.
Yeah.
Lindsay Green is the restaurant and dining critic for the Detroit Free Press. As always, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you. This was fun.
Yay. Coming up, 1 in 3 children are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. As the number goes up, so does the need for supporting parents. My next guest started a nonprofit to do just that. You all stay right there. This is The Metro.